Social media, you haven't seen anything yet. So my academic career started in 2006. I'm a freshly minted PhD out of Emory in Atlanta, and I start my first college course at Boston College teaching a class called Computers in Management, and this was the core information systems course for business school students at Boston College. In 2006, it was not the most popular course on the curriculum because we're in the midst of the dot-com bust. People are asking, does IT really matter? So as the young college professor trying to boost up interest in my course, I decide I'm going to use this new fancy tool called Facebook in the classroom. Well, September of 2006 is also when Facebook launched a new feature called Newsfeed. How many Facebook users are out there? How many people know what Newsfeed is? Okay, so most of you, Newsfeed is very central to the Facebook experience today, but in 2006, it was something different, and my students were mad. And they came into class that first day I ever taught saying, I can't believe Facebook, this is an invasion of my privacy, I'm gonna leave and I'm going back to MySpace. So my first college day ever, I call an audible, and we talk about the business reasons why they wouldn't, in fact, go back to MySpace, and talk through that. Now, what was really remarkable about that day was not that my students were mad, but was that 48 hours later, within the next 48 hours, a new group formed on Facebook called Students Against Newsfeed. Within 48 hours, it gained 250,000 members, which at the time was 30% of all Facebook users. And I said, this social media thing might be worth paying attention to. So I started paying attention. 6 months later, a tragic event, the Virginia Tech massacre. I'm teaching the same course. We happened to be talking about Wikipedia that day in class. So I said, let's go look at how Wikipedia is handling this real-world event. And as we looked into it, I realized something remarkable. That again, within about 36, 48 hours, over 3,000 people had come in, made 8,000 contributions to this page, and created a document that the New York Times itself said beat the popular press at covering this event. You can actually still go back into the talk pages, which is how Wikipedia organizes itself, and look and realize that Wikipedia actually had more accurate information 24 to 36 hours before the press did. That sealed the deal for me, and I've been following social media ever since. And it never has ceased to surprise me over these 8 years, whether it be through events like the Arab Spring Uprising, or last year right here in the Boston Marathon bombing, how social media was used to organize immediately after the event, and how social media was, we used social media to actually follow the apprehension of the suspects, which was being live tweeted by many of my students who were living in Watertown. I'm a native, as you know, as I just said, of Atlanta. This past winter, I was able to experience the traffic apocalypse that happened there because my friends were stuck in traffic, and what did they have to do but share their updates on Facebook. And so they were stuck in traffic for 30 hours, and I could experience it alongside of them, much warmer than they were. Or it could have been Oreo cookie. As the lights go out in the Super Bowl, 5 minutes later, they release an ad on Twitter that says you can still dunk in the dark. And it was the most popular video ad that year, cost them nothing in terms of ad dollars, or selfies heard around the world. So I've been studying social media for about 8 years now, and I'm going to share a couple of things that I've learned in this time. And the first thing, which may be a little surprising, is there is no such thing as social media, but it's here to stay. This phrase is much along the lines of, the king is dead, long live the king. So what do I mean there's no such thing as social media? Well, most of us, if we were pressed to define what social media is, we'd fall back on probably what Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart said about pornography, Well, I know it when I see it. So when we think of social media, oh yeah, that is Facebook, that's Twitter, that's LinkedIn. The problem with that approach nowadays is there is a new Facebook or new social media platform every other day that does something slightly different, and it becomes a mess. And even if we can put some organizing principles to this and make it look real pretty, it's still a mess. It's hard to know where social media starts, where certain things stop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this I know it when I see it is not very effective. Second thing, okay, so let's come up with a clear, concise definition of what social media is. I've been trying to do this for 5 years and have utterly failed. And you can look at some of the more popular ones up online, and we're not going to go through these, but they become convoluted, they become complex, they become self-referential. It's really hard to say what social media is, you know, vis-a-vis previous technologies. So I'm going to argue to you today that there is no such thing as social media. Social media is just the internet. Social media is exactly what the internet was always supposed to be, and it has just evolved over time. Fortunately, I have good company with this perspective on social media, and that is in the person of Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the man who founded the World Wide Web. And he agrees. He says, when I created the World Wide Web, I designed it for a social effect, to help people work together and not as a technical toy. And he calls words like Web 2.0 and social media jargon, and says, really what we're seeing is just the natural evolution of what the internet was always supposed to be. So 2 implications for this view of social media. First, as we ask ourselves, is this social media thing a fad, as I've been asking myself for 8 years, I think it's a fad if and only if you believe the internet is a fad. I sort of believe Google and Amazon are here to stay, and so I'm not willing to sort of call the internet a fad. Certainly there are things that are overhyped. Certainly there are things we need to be critical about. But I think the world of social media is here to stay, and it's going to continue to change. We're going to talk about that in a second. Second, the other implication, keep in mind I'm a business school professor. As executives ask me, should I be using social media in my workplace? The answer is, you already are. The question is, are you using it well or not? What do I mean? They say, what do you mean we're using social media? Well, email is social media. You'd be hard-pressed when I talk about needing to define social media, you'd be hard-pressed to come up with a definition that does include things like Facebook and Twitter, but doesn't include email. And Clay Shirky, who's one of my favorite writers on social media, even calls the reply all button on email to be the first social feature. Now, of course, as you chuckle knowingly, it's not altogether the best social feature, because once a year at Boston College, somebody accidentally sends an email to the university-wide distribution list, and then it becomes performance art as 100 people say, please take me off this list, what is going on here, hi everybody, you know, and it just, your email is useless until this thing dies away. But that reply all button is the first feature that allowed us to go from one-to-one communication instantly to group messaging and group communication. And I agree with this. And so if we look at this whole thing, companies are using social media. The question, are they using the right social media for the right purpose, and are they using it efficiently? And I would argue, and most organizational people I know would agree, that we vastly overuse email and often use it for the wrong purposes. So my second point is to give you a little bit of update into what companies are doing with social media right now. I'm involved in a research effort with MIT Sloan Management Review and Deloitte. We're in the process of coming up with our yearly report on the state of social business, and you're getting a preview. So a couple things we've learned is that, one, companies are beginning to use social media. Early on, there were reports that most social media efforts in companies would fail, and in fact, our survey this year shows that almost across the board, companies are reporting that they are, in fact, finding business value out of social media. It's helping them do things more effectively, more efficiently. And the business value that companies are receiving from social media are tied into something called social media, we call their social media maturity. So it's not fundamentally about the technologies that companies are being successful with, but it's about the business processes, it's the maturity, it's the practices they're able to institute because of these technologies. And you see this slope up and to the right, the maturity scores across the bottom, and what we see as the more mature companies are reporting greater business value. Companies usually start social media in terms of marketing, interacting with their customers, but as they mature, they begin to move it internally and begin to use it for other business purposes such as collaboration, such as innovation, and such as operations. So as companies mature, they reach a balance between internal and external uses of social media. And one of the biggest differentiating factors between high mature and low mature companies is whether they are using social data. It's this social data that allows us to look at what people are doing, understand how they're interacting, and use that to inform their day-to-day decision making. As companies become more mature, they make greater use of this social data. And then last but not least, companies, even if they are successful with social media and social business, they're also reporting that it introduces new challenges. This graph here, what we see is a correlation between multinational companies that say, yes, we are getting value out of social business, and yes, it is introducing new problems in terms of the regulatory environment, in terms of the cultural environment, in terms of the language environment, et cetera, et cetera. So the takeaway for this, and again, probably the biggest distinguishing factor amongst companies that are using social media effectively or not for business processes, is it's about their business transformation. High maturity companies, their leaders are more likely to say, social media is an opportunity for us to fundamentally rethink the way we do things. It's not about the tools, it's not about the technology, it's about allowing us to do business, to interact, to put organizations together in different ways thanks to these tools. So it's not the technology, it's the business transformation. So last but not least, what is it about social media that is different? So yes, it is the internet, but what's been happening? What is it about it that's caused all these surprising events? A couple of things. First is social media is now, or the internet, is now mobile and ubiquitous. So now most people are interacting with social media on their mobile devices. And although in the early days of the internet, there was a pretty big digital divide between the haves and the have-nots, that digital divide is shrinking considerably. In fact, Facebook has an entire division dedicated to developing Facebook for feature phones so that people in developing countries can access Facebook. And in fact, many people's first experience with the internet is through Facebook on their mobile devices. Also, when people are mobile, they have access to Facebook or social media all the time. And when you can assume that almost everybody has access to social media almost all the time, that changes your assumptions going into it. That changes how we can use this as a business communication tool. Because do we want to use a platform that's going to leave some people out? No. Or that people aren't going to be ready for? No. As more people get online, as more people get on social media, the business opportunities only increase. So it's the mobility and it's ubiquity, point one. Second is social media allows us to do things, interact with people fundamentally differently. In academia, we call these social media affordances. What this is basically, it gives us new opportunities for interacting with each other. A great example here is something I call network transparency. So research has shown that people are usually pretty bad about describing their social networks. Yes, I am pretty good about knowing who I am friends with, but I'm not that good at knowing what they think about me, and I'm even worse about knowing what they think about their other friends. Yet all this becomes transparent on social media. Facebook will say, people, you have these mutual friends. LinkedIn will say, you are 2 degrees separated from this person, and here's how you get connected with them. And how people are going to use this to interact differently is not entirely clear. Some research says, people are going to use this strategically. They're going to develop much richer, more valuable networks by connecting with diverse people. And then another stream of research says, given an infinite amount of people to connect with, you are going to connect with people that are exactly like you. And we're going to create these filter bubbles where we all only talk to people that are just like us. So this transparency allows us to understand how other people are relating and make decisions based on that. For instance, I was working in a project team for 2 years and never knew one of the people on the project team was cousins with one of my best friends. Found that out in 10 seconds once we were friends on Facebook. Point 3 is the enabling of the social analytics. We talked about data. What's really remarkable about social is we create these digital trails over time. And for a researcher like me, I geek out on this stuff. And this is what got me into this. So now when I want to study a 10-year collaborative project like Wikipedia, I don't need to invest 10 years of my time in doing it. I just go collect the data that has already been preserved by Wikipedia and look at that. And we have research that are looking at tens of thousands of articles amongst tens of thousands of contributors and looking at how these evolve over time. And we can see feedback loops, and we can see dynamics, and we can see non-linearities that would have been almost impossible to look at just 10 years ago. It would have been too much time and effort. So this social media analytics, and imagine if you're a manager and you now have a dashboard that shows how your employees are working together and whether marketing is talking to product development and what can we do about it if they're not. Last but not least, design. One of the really remarkable things about social media is we can design the social environment. And I think we've only just begun to scratch the surface here. So if you think about Facebook versus Twitter, on Facebook, you have to reciprocate friendship. So if Dustin says he's my friend, I have to say, yes, we are friends before Facebook will recognize that. But on Twitter, anybody can follow anybody, and you have nothing to say about that. That simple design decision makes huge differences in how people are actually going to use the platform. Because I'm going to share different information with my friends than with random followers. And I'm going to use it for different purposes. That's one small design decision, and we have an almost infinite number at our disposal now. So what this does is it results in a complex system. We design features in new ways, which allows us to interact with people in new ways, which allows us to analyze how people are interacting, which allows us to optimize the platforms, which gives us new ways to interact, and it creates this complex cycle that are going to unfold in unusual and unexpected ways. And that's why when I said in the beginning that social media has continued to surprise me over the past 8 years, I think it will continue to surprise us in the future because of this. And the real challenge here is what social media does is it challenges some of the very basis on which companies are built. All of these theories of the firm which say that firms exist to do X, Y, and Z, social media challenges much of that. So when I say we haven't seen anything yet, as companies begin to start using social media for their operations, for their interactions, I think we're going to see social media fundamentally transform how organizations, how companies, how hospitals, how other organizations work. And just as the teaser, ironically, I think the world in the future is going to look more like the way things did 150 years ago than 15 years ago. As we can, if you've ever lived in a small town, you know that people can interact, and when everybody knows each other, you act in different ways. So social media, I think it's here to stay, and I don't think we've seen anything yet. Thank you very much.